Let's go to the States, where former US President Donald Trump has apparently arrived at the New York courthouse, where he's facing 34 counts of fraud. He's accused of trying to cover up a hush money payment of $130,000 to adult film star Stormy Daniels ahead of the 2016 election. He denies having an affair with Stormy Daniels and denies any legal wrongdoing. And we'll talk to Philip Crowther, who's outside the courtroom, in a moment or two, after we've spoken to Jane Mulkerrins, who is Times journalist, of course, associate editor of the Times Magazine. And you have got to know Stormy Daniels, is that fair to say, over the last couple of years? How did you meet her?
Yeah, I first met her in 2018, I think, late 2018. She had just released her book, full disclosure, her memoir, in which she describes the alleged night she spent with Donald Trump that he denies. And I was interviewing her for the book. It was the only interview she was going to do for a non-American newspaper. And we just got on very well. I really enjoyed meeting her. And about 6 months later, she then asked me if I would be in conversation with her at an event in Washington, D.C. And I think that was probably the moment when we became probably, professional friends, I would say.
Yeah, and professional friends is an interesting term because that suggests that you can be of use to each other.
Absolutely.
And there's nothing wrong with that, is there?
No, I mean, Stormy is incredibly bright and incredibly canny, and we do speak sometimes in between times, but often we speak when she's got a new podcast to promote, or she's got a new project, which is exactly what, as a journalist, you want people to do. You want them to come to you with with their stories and their updates. But yeah, we've stayed in touch over the years, and I was very fortunate this time last year when the news dropped that Donald Trump was going to be indicted. And she and I had been in touch for a few weeks because it looked likely to happen. And when it did happen, it was just very late at night in the UK, and I got in touch with her. And it was late at night when she then got back to me. And it was just a very lucky time difference that went in my favour that I ended up being the first person to speak to her.
Now, the affair between the two of them,
I wouldn't even.
And it's not really an affair.
It's an affair.
No.
She alleges that they had one night in a hotel suite together in Nevada, and that there was another incident where she went to meet him when nothing sexual happened. She says there was one sexual incident, one night in a hotel room.
Right.
In 2006.
Okay, so 10 years before the alleged hush money payment as he approached the American election. Right, okay. And over that 10-year gap, did they have any contact at all?
Yeah, she says that he did get in touch from time to time. He would call her. She'd put him on speakerphone to amuse her friends. This is Donald Trump from The Apprentice calling, offering me a slot on The Apprentice again. She says that they did stay in touch over the years, and she sort of thought it was hilarious because she hadn't. It wasn't an affair. He was married at the time. She hadn't sort of taken it very seriously. I think she would say she thought it was a little bit of a hoot that Donald Trump was contacting her. And then, of course, when he ran for president, it sort of had a new perspective.
Well, you can say that again. I mean, what goes through your head if you are Stormy Daniels and you are sticking to your story about this sexual encounter that didn't last very long, if we believe Stormy Daniels' account?
2 to 3 minutes, she says.
And then that same individual runs for president. It's quite something, isn't it?
Yeah, I think surreal would be an understatement. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So we have now a situation where Stormy Daniels is going to give evidence in this trial. It's jury assembly day today, isn't it? So we're not expecting much action today.
We're not expecting much action this week, actually, or
Right.
possibly even early next week. So the jury selection is going to take quite a while because they do have to be incredibly careful how they select this jury.
How would you?
It's really hard. There are 42 questions that they're being asked, every member of the potential jury, including a lot of questions about whether they've ever attended any kind of Trump rally, what their political affiliations are. It's a very complicated jury selection.
And there are double standards at play here, aren't there? And I'm very conscious that as we talk about Stormy Daniels, she is routinely referred to, and I've did it myself, as adult film star Stormy Daniels. Now, that feels judgmental and that feels very wrong. And I wonder whether any would-be jury member will be asked if they've ever watched any porn, for example. It's possible that they will be asked that. They certainly should be, and they should answer truthfully. But how is she about that label being attached to her?
Well, she sort of thinks it's a bit of a double-edged sword because she definitely feels that the title has been used by Donald Trump and other people and members of the media to discredit her and to undermine her credibility.
But the hypocrisy is off the scales.
Absolutely, but she feels that if she were a housewife or a school teacher, there wouldn't be. She wouldn't be described as housewife Stormy Daniels, school teacher Stormy Daniels, but because she's an adult film star and director, that is used as a way to cast aspersions on her character. She also feels that it's gone in her favour in some ways, though, because, as she says, she's very difficult to shame. No one's going to be able to put out naked pictures of Stormy Daniels because they're already all out there. So she does feel that in some ways her position and her job and her career have almost insulated her from some of the normal ways in which women are shamed publicly.
But also she is proud of her career, isn't she?
And she's incredibly successful at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in that regard, she, we should be fine if she's fine with the label of.
I think she does feel that it undermines her credibility in the eyes of some members of the public who perhaps don't feel the same about that profession.
Yeah, okay. I think we've lost Philip Crowther, who was the reporter we were going to speak to outside the courtroom, but we can just bring you some of what went on. Here we go.
I think it's a very high likelihood he gets convicted in the case. And then the issue will be what's the sentence and will there be jail terms or things like that. He's the former president, so likely not. But he's not fighting for anybody other than himself. And what he did was a direct violation of campaign finance laws, and the failure to disclose all of that and then the hiding of that is also illegal. So we'll see. I'm not in love with the case, me personally. I don't like Donald Trump. I certainly don't want him to return to the presidency because I just think he's a very dangerous guy. But I'm not in love with the case because it seems like a minor case to be bringing when he's got 3 other cases that I think are actually monumental.
Yeah, that's still to come. That was not, in fact, what went on in the courtroom today, as you may have gathered. But Anthony Scaramucci, who worked, I think, rather briefly for Donald Trump and doesn't think all that well of him. But he won't be the only one. It's interesting that Stormy Daniels is not a Democrat, is she? So she's not. No, she certainly isn't.
She's a registered Republican. She's very much a registered Republican, although she's always told me that she never voted in 2016. Well, who knows? But I thought it was really interesting, that point that Anthony Scaramucci was just making, in that the payment of hush money itself is not illegal. You can pay someone hush money. It's the fact that he lied about what the intention of what the money was being used for, and that's what he's being charged for now, is the violation of business documents, that he's fraudulently put it down as legal expenses instead of the payment of hush money that's got him into trouble. And this is the other thing that Stormy thinks is kind of ironic about it, is that she's been given, a lot of flack over the years for taking $130,000 in hush money and signing an NDA.
And then speaking.
And, well, she didn't break it. The Wall Street Journal broke it.
Well, that's the interesting thing, actually. We need to emphasise that. She didn't come forward. No, okay.
She never broke the NDA herself. It was reported in early 2018 by the Wall Street Journal. And after that, it was basically invalidated, so she could then speak about it. But she also thinks that if she'd never signed the NDA and she'd never taken the hush money, we wouldn't be having this court case. It is sort of interesting. But I will say also, it is seen as potentially the weakest of the 4 criminal cases that he's facing. So it's interesting that Anthony Scaramucci was saying he thinks that there will be a conviction. The experts seem to be pretty split on that, because it isn't seen as the hardest and the most robust of the 4 cases, but it is the only one that will likely come to court before the election, and that's why it's very significant.
And is Stormy Daniels herself, and forgive me if you don't know the answer to this, does she feel vulnerable and worried about her prospects?
She's felt vulnerable since she started speaking out in 2018, and she's felt particularly vulnerable since last March when Trump was indicted. I spoke to her hours afterwards, and she had been receiving the most monumental and graphic death threats, rape threats, threats to her daughter's life, threats to her husband's life, people scaling the walls of her property. She has been physically and psychologically put under an enormous amount of pressure. And then also under pressure from Donald Trump. There's another complicated bit of the case. She has been asked to pay debts for his legal fees in a defamation case. And they've been putting a lot of pressure on her for that. So I think she doesn't feel necessarily afraid of facing Trump in court, but what has made her understandably feel quite anxious and nervous about the results is, the huge outpouring of violence and aggression towards her.
Have we any idea when she will give her testimony? In a couple of weeks' time?
It won't be for a couple of weeks' time, yeah.
Jane, thank you so much.
Thank you.
That